in times of trauma, a lot of times their pattern changes. And it's a pattern that they don't like because it hasn't shut off. It's the pattern that's always been there, but only turns on when danger is around. And so that happens quite frequently as well. At times when, if we're going back to our tiger metaphor, tiger jumps out, strikes you, your amygdala activates, survival mode kicks in. That's a pattern. And then that pattern just stays on. Even after you survive.
Flipping the lid.
Yep.
Okay.
Even after you've survived and you come to my office and you're like, I cannot stand this pattern. And those aren't the words. Usually it's I can't stand what I'm feeling. I can't stand the flashbacks. I can't stand the intrusive thoughts. I can't stand the things that I'm doing. I can't stand, all of these things show up.
Mm-hmm.
And so trauma will activate a pattern that's already been there, by the way. And we've got to go back again and figure out how you got good at it before we can officially address the trauma.
And people
now, if it was a recent trauma, like if it were in, like I just had this last week, this week, if it's recent, it's happening in a few days, we can what we call desensitize it, bring it down to a 0, but we're not actually working through the pattern yet. We've still got to do that work, but I want to be able to let the brain know that you're safe.
Because the pattern possibly hasn't developed. And this is a thing that for parents of children who worry about their children experiencing trauma, I have worked with children from ages, well, my goodness, even before the age of 1. And the earlier I can start working with a child that has experienced abuse or traumatic events, the earlier I can start working with them, the better the ability to interrupt pattern development. Mm-hmm. Because you're so right, these things start at an early age and they continue through our relationships, and then we start saying this person is just like my mother or just like my father or just like someone else that they did not like in their life. And but that person that they're partnering with is not that other person.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. You're not this. Yep.
And you are not this. And even the person that is acting out or stuck in the pattern, stuck in the circular, they may be repeating things or behaviors, ways of coping that they learned from a caregiver or a parent in their life. But I often have to remind them, but you are not them. You are you. So what do you do to start working on helping people? So identification, that's the first. You're working on identifying. How much time do you take in terms of helping people to learn to identify?
So it depends on the client and it depends on how they process. So
true.
If I usually don't spend much time on it unless when we start processing, I see a pattern where they, we call it parts work.
Call it what?
Parts.
Like
internal family systems.
Okay.
And so it's like we'll be processing, and they keep getting stuck in some sort of belief of who they are. Let's say it's a pattern where they feel stuck, like you said, that they feel like their mom or they feel like their dad, or they have a belief of dad or a belief of mom. and they get stuck and they can't really get out of that,
Mhm.
I might say, is there another part that feels differently?
So you said parts work.
Yeah, parts
Okay.
work, like
Okay.
internal parts.
Okay.
And usually they'll say, yeah, there's another part, and we'll process through that. And then I will stop after that session and we'll go back to psychoeducation to start talking about the internal family systems of who you are as in terms of identity.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Give me an example of how they would, the first identification they would have, and then when you do this parts work, how they would look at another part, how they would identify another part.
Okay. Um, this. So, um, imagine, um, this might show up in general. If a person comes to me, and we're talking about parts, I will ask them, often the part that's in this office with me of who you are might be very different than the person that you are when you're with friends
Okay.
or when you're dealing with a stressful situation or when you're feeling different feelings, right? Like you're going to be a different kind of person when you're feeling fear, guilt, loneliness, shame, and grief. We call that like the exile, or the person that's feeling judged, or a person that has to control everything, or self-critical, or the planner. Like that person within inside of you might be like a manager type of individual. A lot of times that's the parentified self as well.
So you're naming and identifying roles,
Yeah, yeah,
the actors. In
yes,
other words, the person is like Meryl Streep, okay? But Meryl Streep takes on a lot of roles. She can
right.
just really become that person in the role that she's playing.
Let me tell you, I've worked with that community, that demographic, and it's interesting when you get an actor in your door.
Well,
It's a lot of fun, and it's a challenge, because
it seems like on the one hand it would be challenging because I could so easily go into a role, but then easier to identify and deal with because the realization that they are playing a role.
right, which is great, and they have so many resources, and they pull from different resources.
How fascinating.
But
Okay.
sometimes they actually are neglecting the self when they do that, because they're not using a resource that would be helpful for them. They're using a resource that they think would be helpful because it's worked with this part or that part.
So it's a total smoke and mirrors in terms of who am I really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. It's interesting.
Well, it's all incredibly interesting and fascinating, but it also causes a lot of problems in the families, especially in partnerships and in parenting
Mm-hmm.
and work. It plays out in work as well. And I have asked clients what are the behaviors that you are repeating that hurt you as a child, and how are you replaying that, and how are you replaying the past. And so we can look at identifying that, and then the next step is, what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, Taylor, what do we do about it?
I mean, I use EMDR where I don't have a full answer. They actually have the answer, what they want to do about it. It shows up. Somehow the brain knows. We just don't give it a chance because we have so much judgment. And so I actually enter a space of curiosity with them. Again, it sounds ridiculous, but I sit there and a lot of times I just use the words, go with that. And what did you notice? And it's amazing to see what answers show up. Because they're going to believe and they're going to do whatever shows up for them. More out of their mouth than what comes out of my mouth.
So the answer is within each of us.
Right?
It's in our gut. It's in our being. It's what the whole mind body connection thing again of it's not in your brain somewhere out here, in your body somewhere out here. It's within us, but we just have to find what that is within us that feels natural to our whole being.
And you've got to be able, again, to have no judgment and just to be curious. And it might feel silly. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And so a lot of times, I'll get the client that is uncomfortable and will speak the phrase, I don't know. And that's a leading phrase of, instead, I'm uncomfortable. I'm confused. I need your help.
Which we are facilitators.
Yeah.
And facilitators that's really our role, not to give the answers.
Yeah. And I sit there and I might say, okay, I hear that you don't know.
And people are doing this for the first time.
Yeah. And I'll say, is it okay if we just sit in that for a moment? We may not get the answer right away, but let's just sit in that for one moment. Go with that. Okay, what do you get now? When this happened, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what do you get now? Oh, I have this feeling of blah, 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 and it's amazing what ends up coming up. If we can just sit with it for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So
I had a personal experience of, I was trying to make a decision at one time about someone coming to visit. And I really was not looking forward to that visit because it just was a lot of pressure that I put on myself to perform and to have to be a certain way. And for some reason, I was just standing in front of the mirror in my bathroom, and I was standing in front of the mirror, and I just stepped to one side, and I pretended to be the person that was going to be receiving the visit.
Yeah.
And I started talking to myself in the mirror, and I started saying, and how does this make you feel? Well, this makes me feel put upon and rotten and angry, and just all kinds of negativity came up. And then and this was all just spontaneous. It just happened. And then I stepped to the other side of the mirror, and I said, now you're going to say, no, I don't want you to come visit. How does that make you feel? And it was like, wow, I feel just like a ton of weight has been lifted off of me. I just feel like, I can do that. Well, yeah, I can do that. I can say, no, I don't want you to come visit. Mm-hmm. And actually that ended, and and then I just was this other person, this alternate person that was standing over here was very liberated, and this one over here was just like under bondage. And it was, so I made the decision of saying, no, I don't want you to come visit. And that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, we call that the empty chair technique.
Well, that's
You can invite
that's
yourself.
gestalt work, right?
Yeah, right. You can invite yourself to come sit down in that chair, and let's just have a role play. Let's talk. What is the need? How can you support? Let's role play whatever it is that you need to take from it or give. I do a lot of, I would, I have a mirror that I have in my desk drawer. I don't have a mirror like posted on my wall, but I will do exactly what you just said. Well, I'll get that mirror out, and if a client really is, hard on themselves, even during EMDR, I might bring out that mirror and have them hold it against the wall, and have them actually truly look at themselves. And then I'll facilitate by asking them questions like, what have you held against this person? What would you like for this person to hear? What is it that they need? How do they feel? Would you like to forgive them? As they're looking at themselves. And it's amazing to see what shows up.
Mm-hmm. It is.